Billy Carson could not fight back. This is now on the Patrick Bet David podcast. Wesley Huff absolutely just crushed it on that debate. If you don't know, you're about to find out. And yeah, PBD, God bless you.
People like Billy are very confident in the way that they say things, but that confidence isn't always backed up with the reality of the evidence. The sources you used were not primary.
We're still talking
and they
over and over again. There's so much more we can talk about here. We're wasting a lot of time.
Confidence and competence are not the same thing. And
wow.
I thought what was surprising to me about my interaction with Billy was that I was expecting some sort of rebuttal. Billy went to Mark's house with a handwritten cease and desist letter.
Uh-oh.
People would never expect to go there. What happened after you guys were done with the podcast?
Well, we did the podcast, and then it was very clear that Billy did not want the podcast to air.
Why? Because a genius solves problems before they happen. And I'm going to drop the mic on that.
Wow.
Some weird people are going to become Christians next 2 years.
And if you watch the interaction I had with him, it's on my YouTube channel. There was no rebuttal.
So, yeah, go on. We can do a follow-up.
I really appreciate it, Billy. Thanks so much for interacting.
Mark is here. I didn't even know Mark was going to be here, right? Mark is the fellow that you did a podcast with Billy. Would you have done it if you knew what it was going to turn into? Would you have done it now, looking back?
Wow. Mark was completely
I found out about
lost
my
in the whole
yesterday,
thing.
Wes Huff, by a debate that he did with Billy Carson. And Billy Carson was...
Wait, I found out
about my yesterday, Wes Huff, by a debate that he did with Billy Carson. And Billy Carson, who's been on our podcast before, they had a sit down together, which afterwards there was a bunch of commotion and, don't release it. He contacts the host, Mark Minard, which, by the way, today was the first day that Mark Minard, the host of, I think it's called Elevating Beyond or some name like that of a podcast, it was the first time he and Wes met each other. And I even brought Mark at the end of the podcast to speak for a few minutes about his experience with Billy. And it was very interesting watching him. But Wes, what an interesting guy, young guy who we talked about the difference between how many times you read the book of Quran. He's read, I think, 3 times. And the difference between the book of Quran and Christianity. He broke down his views on Mormonism. And then I asked the question, I said, so if Quran is what you say it is, why is the religion of Islam growing at the pace that it is, faster than Christian church, and why is attendance in Christian church declining? And he gave his argument it's growing in different places. I said, why is it not growing in America? And we talked about a handful of different things that I wrote down here, why are people, it was very interesting conversation. We talked about Andrew Tate, his conversion to Islam, and Justin Trudeau, Canada, his discomfort on talking about politics, which we got into a little bit at the end with what's going on. I asked him a technical question. I said, hey, you yourself, a Christian man, his struggles as a young bandit, what did you deal with, right? We talked about biblical times when Jesus came, and what was the OnlyFans of that time? With the amount of sins that we have today, OnlyFans, porn, all this other stuff, are we at a point where he's making a return? It was just an incredible conversation with somebody who is very qualified to speak on this topic, and I really enjoyed it, and I think you will as well with Wes Huff.
30 seconds.
Did you ever think you would make it?
The day before. So
I think it's about
whether
here.
it's us, whether it's Rogan, whether it's Andrew Schultz. Oh my God, who is this Wes guy? And he was just recently on Rogan, and I don't know if that's been released yet or not. I'm
Today.
sure it's going to be fantastic. Yeah. So the timing is great. And then I reached out, I DM'd him. I said, listen, great work, good for you. I enjoyed the conversation, would love to have you on. And boom, now he's here with us. So it's great to have you on.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
And so when you went in, and obviously today I want to kind of get to know your background a little bit because it's very interesting. You just told me your grandfather used to sell Bibles in Iran.
Well, he worked for the Iranian Bible Society.
Iranian Bible Society in 1979, you said?
Yeah, 1979 to 1980.
Okay, so that's post-revolution.
Mm-hmm, yeah, immediately
then
before.
You used to live in Pakistan, and you went to school in Pakistan.
Well, I was born in Pakistan.
And did you go to school there? Or?
No, I was. We left during the Gulf War.
Okay.
My parents were accused of the crime of proselytizing, giving a Bible to a Muslim, and then we came back from overseas to Toronto, where my parents lived, And then a year after that, went out, and for a very short stint of my childhood, we were in Jordan, in the Middle East.
How long was that?
Between is it like in the 90s for a few years.
You're young, so how old were you at that time?
Oh, I was quite young. We came back when I was like 6 or 7.
Do you have any memories of?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
And I went back after I graduated high school. I went back and worked more rurally. I worked with Bedouin, whereas when I was really young, we were in Amman, which was much more of the city. But when I went back after I graduated high school, I did some work with a Bedouin in an area just north of Aqaba.
So tell me about your family lineage. Like, your father, is it everybody was my pastor, Dudley Rutherford, his father was a pastor, his uncles were all pastors, his brothers were all pastors. Like, everybody was a pastor. Biola University or APU or Ozark or all this other stuff. The way you were breaking things down with Billy was very obvious. You've been, taught the right way. You went to the school, but tell me about the family lineage.
Yeah, so my dad is a pastor. He was a missionary, was a pastor. He's retired now. Not a long lineage necessarily of pastors, but my middle name is Livingston, and my dad's name is Livingston, and that's the family name going back to a guy named David Livingston, who was a missionary, who was the first, I believe, European to go into Central Africa. So, and we're related to him. So since there was because I believe it was his niece married outside of the family, the firstborn male since then has been named Livingston. So my father, my grandfather, my great-grandfather. But it's my middle name, and it's my son's middle name as well.
Very cool.
Yeah. Okay. So there's a lineage going back into the heritage of Christian ministry and missionaries, going back that far. And then, so.
How did you go on a mission ever yourself or no?
By myself?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've done some trips. When I was in Jordan, I was working, doing that kind of stuff. I've done some short-term mission trips to...
As an adult?
Yeah. Okay. Just after I graduated high school, between high school and going to university, I had a couple trips. Was in Rwanda, was in Mexico, and I was quite a bit younger, but yeah.
Yeah, I watched the interview with you, and the podcast, the fellow who was on there, his name is Mark, I want to say his last name correctly, Menard, right, if I'm not mistaken. And his podcast is called Elevation Beyond. I think it's called
Elevating Beyond.
Elevating Beyond, right, with Mark Menard. And so walk me through how this whole thing happened with you and Billy Carson. Because when you watch Billy's been at it for 14, 15 years. I think the first time, if you search up his material, you will hear he started in 2010. And he's gotten tens, if not hundreds of millions of views on many different interviews. I think even if you include TikTok, Instagram and everything combined, it's probably in the billions of views that he's gotten.
Yeah.
Until he sat down with you, but walk me through the invitation. Did Mark invite you? Did Billy invite you? How did that happen?
Yeah, so Mark invited me. He sent me a DM on Instagram the day before. So as far as I understand it, the plan was actually for Mark and Billy to interact. Mark's a Christian, so he has Christian faith and conviction, and had talked to Billy because they had been friends, talked a lot about business together and different things like that. And so they were setting up, which had sort of been in the ether for a while, to have a conversation about some of the disagreements that they had about what Billy said about Christianity, how Mark feels about Christianity. And Anton, who is Mark's media manager, had compiled a bunch of different sources that Mark could look at and kind of review in plan for this. And I'd done in some of my social media videos just some short response videos to something that Billy had said on your podcast when you had him in, when Andrew Schultz had him on, when Joe Rogan had him on, just quick 2-minute things, just kind of correcting some of those errors. And so Anton put together a Google Doc of some of this stuff, me, a few other people, and how I understand it is that Mark just kind of said to Anton right before, what happens if we just reach out to Wes? What happens if we just see if he can come and interact? So he reached out to me the day before. I was out at a lunch meeting with a friend and saw the message and, couldn't get down to Florida to actually do it in person, but said, I'll jump on a call. And I'm more than willing to do that and interact with Billy and kind of go back and forth with some of the claims that he's made about Christianity.
And what was your biggest takeaway when you sat down with him?
Guys, pause real quickly. Don't worry about it. We're literally going to carry on. But look at how interesting and what happens when you serve God, though. The fact that he took that call, he now ends up on Joe Rogan and Patrick Bet David, the biggest podcasts out there right now. You can't write this stuff.
Go back and forth with some of the claims that he's made about Christianity.
And what was your biggest takeaway when you sat down with him? What did you see that was maybe different than you had seen him on different podcasts when he's speaking? What did you sense?
I think people like Billy are very confident in the way that they say things, but that confidence isn't always backed up with the reality of the evidence. And so confidence and competence are not the same thing. And I thought what was surprising to me about my interaction with Billy was that I was expecting some sort of rebuttal. And if you watch the interaction I had with him, it's on my YouTube channel, there was no rebuttal. So we get into the topics. He claims that Jesus wasn't crucified. He kind of has these sources that he uses. He brought those up, predictably, as I thought he might. And I addressed why those sources don't work for his claim. And then he collapsed. He just said, well, the first claim was that it was from the Sinai Bible, which is Codex Sinaiticus. And I happen to have a facsimile, a photocopy of Codex Sinaiticus on my shelf. And so I simply pulled it off my shelf and said, well, do you mind telling me where you think it denies the crucifixion or that the crucifixion isn't there? Because this is a 4th century Greek Bible. It has the crucifixion. And so he kind of pivoted to saying, well, no, I misspoke. I actually meant the Gospel of Barnabas, which is a known forgery. And so I think my surprise was that he didn't try to double down. He just completely capitulated and then tried to move the topics onward.
So you're asking him questions because I'm watching the back and forth. You're not being aggressive and disrespectful. You kept posing questions. So may I ask where you got this source from? If you don't mind me asking, can you break this thing down for me? And he's giving his rebuttal. And what do you know about this, and that? And he would pause. And you would go and say, well, actually, I wrote a thesis on this. And the approach that you're going back and forth with him. What happened after you guys were done with the podcast?
Well, we did the podcast, and then it was very clear that Billy did not want the podcast to air. So he got in contact with Mark, and he said, this thing can't go out. And he had a couple of different reasons, which he verbalized. But the reasons did kind of shift. There was some talk of a debate. Well, at first he said, I didn't really understand that this was going to be as of a debate as it turned out to be. And I typically ask a fee. So he says he, asked $50,000 for a debate. That was never put forth. And so it was unfair because this is his kind of standard practice, is that it costs $50,000 to debate Billy Carson. And then he brought forward that there was some sort of interaction, formal debate that was being set up with another Christian that this was interfering with. Now, I doubt that was the case. I've been part of events where debates have taken place, and why this conversation would have truly impinged on a later debate is unclear to me. But that was what he said, and so at this point, Mark and Billy are friends. They've known each other for years. They live in the same neighborhood, and so for the good faith of their friendship, Mark decides to do Billy a solid and hold on to the footage. But Mark contacted me only a couple days later and said, here's the situation, Wes. It's not going to go out. Billy doesn't want me to put it out. And I think Mark was a little bit uncomfortable with the fact that Billy didn't want it put out. And so I simply said, that's fine. It's your podcast. But I'm going to make a video and simply say that this event happened. And so that's what I did. And as things transpired, it was clear that not everything was adding up on Billy's side, but then also a lot of people were accusing me of actually making up the interaction.
Got it.
And so as that kind of took place...
What percentage? Your own audience?
No, just people online.
Okay.
Yeah.
So go ahead. So you're saying, here's what happened. Some people are saying, I don't know, you're just making things up. That would have never happened. Billy's strong. He would never be able to, you would never be able to hang with somebody like Billy. And
right. Yeah, and then I just kind of say to Mark as we're talking back and forth, because we're communicating throughout, the course of the aftermath of this. And I said, hey, people are accusing me of lying, of making this up. And Mark was quite uncomfortable with that. Mark was quite uncomfortable with the fact that people are accusing me of dishonesty. And so then he made a video where he said that it did happen. And in that video, he included a number of clips of the actual interaction.
But not the whole podcast?
No, he held on to the podcast for over a month.
Oh, so let me get this straight. So when, so this thing, when was the actual interview?
October 18th.
On my birthday, October 18th. And he released it when? Because on your channel it says December 9th.
Yes.
And I don't see it on his channel anymore.
No, so what transpired was that Mark released it in November. And he released it, and it was up for less than 24 hours. In fact, I don't even think it was up for more than 6 hours.
Okay.
Because Billy showed up to Mark's house with a cease and desist letter at 2:30 in the morning.
Wow.
Okay, so is this the part where there's a video of it with the Ring camera?
Yeah. Yeah, so if people are interested in this, I would recommend two sources. Anton put out a video where he kind of, he chronologically lays out some of the things that led up to it. And then Mark himself, just a couple of weeks ago, put out a video where he, from his side, put out, here's my side of the story of the things that happened because Billy went to Mark's house with a handwritten cease and desist letter. And
handwritten?
Handwritten.
At 2:30 in the morning?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then what does Mark do? Mark takes it down.
So Mark took the video down. It was less, I think, in regards to Billy, more that this was just turning into something that was because of the complexity of Mark's situation. You know, he lives in the same neighborhood. Billy's wife is friends with Mark's wife. Their boys play basketball together. Like, this is messy. This is messy for Mark on a different level than it's messy for me.
For sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's tough because you're going to practice. I can't believe you did this. Kids are not having conflicts.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially if you're that doesn't help. So during this time when it's up 6 hours, I'm assuming you get the file and you say, I'm going to put it on my channel.
Well, so I had the file. One of the things that I did do when Mark said, hey, you know, I'm just going to hold on to this. Billy's asked me to, and so I'm going to do this for the moment, is I said, you know, 2 things. I'm going to put out a video. I'm going to say that this happened, and I would like you to send me a copy of it. So Mark actually did send me a copy of it, which I said, I will not put out without your permission. Now, certain things transpired where, you know, it kind of came to light that Mark, because of the complexities of his situation, wasn't going to repost the video, but I decided to repost the video on my end on early December.
And you guys spoke, and he said, I'm going to go live with it.
I said I'm going to go live with it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what was his reaction when you said that?
He was fine with it. Mark has been pretty behind the scenes.
Okay.
I think on purpose and for good reasons. He's gotten a lot of flack because of some of the way that the conversation transpired with Billy. But if you ask Mark, he will say, and I think he says in his video, he was so surprised during the interaction. He's in the room with Billy, and he's very surprised that Billy, who is Mr. Confidence, Mr. Ancient Evidence, is completely collapsing. So for Billy, who usually always has the monologue, to say, well, okay, well, that's fair. Let's move on to the next topic. I think Mark was, not to speak for him, but I think he was genuinely a little bit confused, and so felt like he, to a certain degree, needed to come to Billy's aid in the course of this conversation, because he just felt the kind of secondhand embarrassment that was going on in the room because Billy was really not acting in the way that Billy usually does.
Now, let me ask you, in 14 years since he's been creating content, or he's
this is so good, I don't want to pause it because I'm genuinely like intrigued. So I don't know because when you don't say anything, oh my days, you done a video and you didn't even speak anything. What kind of a video is this? This is not a reaction video. But it's like, I don't just want to pause and just say garbage because this is actually really intriguing. Like right now, I'm annoyed that I'm supposed to explain myself, but you get it. Let's carry on.
And, you know, he's been sharing his stories that he has. Why do you think this hasn't happened for 14 years?
I mean, I think you can strategically put yourself in positions where you're not going to be put on the defense.
Blast.
The thing is with the internet,
like 50K.
and I'm sure you know this as well as anybody, Patrick, that like people love sensationalism. And we live in a world where we know a little about a lot, but we don't know a lot about a little. And so we live in this Wikipedia world, right? You can just hop online. You don't really need to know information. You can kind of, you can shed that out to someone else, right? You can, and someone else being basically the supercomputer in your pocket. And so, and people love sensationalism. People like to hear the crazy story, the conspiracy theory, for, you know, sometimes I think genuine reasons. Some conspiracy theories are true sometimes. But I think when you have people who are saying pretty outrageous things, people like to be entertained, and people like the more sensationalistic theory than the mundane one. So, I mean, in one sense, it is sensationalistic that you have this first century itinerant Jewish preacher in the backwaters of Roman-occupied Judea who predicts his own death and resurrection and then pulls it off. But I think people are so used to the biblical narrative about the historical Jesus that they want something else. It's the same reason the Da Vinci Code got so popular, even though there really wasn't anything historical behind the Da Vinci Code. But people like these kind of under-the-table conversations that are sensationalistic and make you feel like you know something special now. And so I think
exposing somebody, oh my God, Christianity's finally being exposed, that there was another guy in the past that Jesus replicated his story because there was this person that in India and exact same story that did this. So finally Christians are being exposed. Is that kind of what you're
or I mean, every Christmas and Easter, it seems that there's some news article about, you know, this lost or missing gospel that has this story about Jesus.
Well, I remember Da Vinci Code was massive. And even the movie with, who was Tom Hanks in Da Vinci Code? Yeah, there was a 1 and a 2, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Right? There was a couple of them.
Yeah.
And for a person that's not in that world, you can really get caught up in it. Now, have you had a follow-up with Billy? Like, did you guys speak? Has he reached out to you directly?
No, not to me, other than his lawyer sending me a cease and desist letter. But
was that handwritten or was that typed out?
No, that was an actual.
Well, at least he paid you respect.
No, I guess so.
That's a level of respect. You're not getting a handwritten one.
I mean, I think he eventually did send actual cease and desist letters to Mark. But
so that's fair. He has to pay respect to both people, right? So now, if there was a possibility of a part 2, right, with the two of you guys, maybe he had a bad day. Maybe he was sick that day. Maybe he had a a lot on his mind. Maybe he had a, you know, challenges with family, siblings, kids, other things that's going on. Sometimes people have a bad day.
Yeah.
Would you be open to the idea of another one, the two of you guys together, long form, and maybe he brings somebody with him?
Yeah, I would be open to it. I mean, that was the original plan, was that this interaction that we had online would be kind of a precursor to, ideally, an in-person thing with Billy. And I actually said, when Billy sent me the cease and desist letter, I made a video where I said, I will actually adhere to all of the terms and conditions of this letter if you decide to run it back with me and we do it in person. Because I think...
Let them run it back. That's all. This will solve the entire internet, the whole saga, everything that's going on. If they run it back and actually do a face-to-face sit-down one, Billy, you bring all of your high-tech Anunnaki technology and all of your debates. Wes, you sit down and we debate all of this, you know, the Gospel of Barnabas, the Sinaiticus, and all of this stuff. And we put an end to all of this, and you watch Billy crumble. Why? Because it's false. If they wake you up at 5 a.m., let's say you're a mechanic, are you going to fumble and say, oh, well, I don't really know how to fix a car? Or you're going to start saying, oh, wait, this is exactly what Joe Rogan said, similar to this. Like, no, the way to fix the wheels is you do this, and then even if you're sleepy, you know how to change a tire. Okay? You know how to align a steering wheel. How to fuel, because these are things that are ingrained in you because it's your day-to-day routine. Like, how can I? So there's no excuse. There's no excuse. Billy, you might be watching this. Go to Christ. Okay, come back to Christ, because this stuff isn't working. Money is not going to do it for you, my friend. It's unfortunately the truth. And yeah, I want you to be saved. So we're putting all of this, but it's not to laugh at you, but it's to bring you back to Christ. Guys, let's see the comment section real quick. In fact, we'll do a part 2, okay? We'll do a part 2. Like, share this video, and then, yeah, we'll do a part 2, and then so I can give, like, my real take and so forth with uppers.